All right, it's 8:30. I'm not sure we have quorum, so I'll wait a few minutes.
We don't yet.
Hi, it's Brenda.
Okay. Hey, Brenda.
I'm
Morning.
just trying to fiddle with my camera.
Click this.
Okay.
Click that out. Yeah, just click the button. Yeah. Okay. Now turn your camera on.
There. Sorry.
Morning. And
There you are.
maybe I'd just take a second to introduce Carol Francis, who has just joined. Carol is the new director with our People and Culture team, and
That's great.
been with us for about a week. And
Check it out.
just wanted to introduce Carol on today's call.
All right. Thanks, Grant. Welcome, Carol. Good to see you and good to have you on board.
Maybe there's something going on with your camera there.
Difficulties, yeah.
I
Morning,
know.
thanks.
Morning.
Nice to start.
She's casting that eerie shadow, eh?
Okay.
She's here in the office, so I do know she's on the floor here.
Did I make it?
All right. Well, we'll await her response.
Light on over there.
Morning, Vince.
Morning.
Christine.
Hey, Vince.
Morning.
Never mind.
Now she's going to hear you, Grant.
Hey,
Oh, so
hey,
Carol, I'm not sure.
We were
Carol, you
welcoming
heard.
you, but
No, sorry, I forgot my glasses at the other desk. So
Oh,
I
okay.
walked
All right.
over. But good morning, everyone.
Welcome on board. Good to have you. Thanks for coming to this board meeting.
Thank you for having me.
This is our new HR lady.
It's our new HR lady. Yes.
Yes. Hi, Carol. Yeah.
Hi, Brenda.
We did canvass for attendance today, and we are expecting additional members to attend. So I know we don't have.
We'll wait a few minutes just for live people who are joining us on YouTube or whatever social media forum you're using. We are waiting for quorum, so as soon as we get a quorum, we'll get started.
How many do we need for quorum?
5.
I think we need 5.
1, 2, 3,
There we go.
4. Oh, Jim. Jim is 5.
Hey, Jim. Good morning. Welcome.
Morning, Jim.
Okay, so we have quorum, right?
Yes.
All right. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to the
trouble
Toronto
getting
Seniors
the link
Housing
this morning.
Corporation Board of Directors meeting. Today is August the 3rd, and we are about to start the meeting now that we've established a quorum. Before I proceed further, I'll go through the land acknowledgement. Toronto Seniors Housing acknowledges that we are on the traditional territory of many nations, including Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed with Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaties, signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. Now for the African ancestral acknowledgement, Toronto Seniors Housing acknowledges all treaty peoples, including those who came here as settlers, as migrants, either in this generation or in generations past. And those of us who came here involuntarily, particularly those brought to these lands as a result of the transatlantic slave trade and slavery. We pay tribute to those ancestors of African origin and descent. Are there any amendments to the agenda? The agenda was circulated. Hearing none, can I get a motion that the public agenda as circulated be approved?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Warren. May I have a seconder, please? Thanks, Jim. All in favor? That is approved. Okay, we'll move on to the conflict of interest declaration. Are there any conflicts of interest? Okay, hearing none. If anything arises during the course of the discussion, members can so declare. I think I saw Maureen has just joined us. I want to, Maureen, officially welcome you to the Toronto Seniors Housing Corporation Board. It's great to see you, and you and I had a conversation before this meeting. Welcome on board, and
Thank you
we
very
look
much.
forward to your participation.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're now in item number 6, the approval of the public session board minutes. Again, these minutes were circulated. Are there any amendments to the minutes?
No.
Hearing none, may I have a motion that the public board minutes of April 27th, 2023 be approved?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Warren. May I have a seconder, please?
I'll second.
Thanks,
Brenda.
Maureen. All in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Okay, moving on to item number 7, approval of closed session board minutes of April 27th, May the 16th, and July the 7th. Are there any amendments to the minutes? Hearing none, again, may I have a motion that the closed session board minutes of April 27th, 2023, May the 16th, 2023, and July the 7th, 2023 be approved?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Warren, may I have a seconder, please?
Seconded by Brenda.
Thanks, Brenda. All in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Item number 8, are there any matters arising from the minutes? The action items? I see Linda has joined us. Welcome, Linda. Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to item number 9, which is the board committee membership and committee chair process. Thanks, Christine, and thanks, Grant, for putting this together. This was included as part of your package. If you've got any questions, I can respond, or Christine, I'm not sure if Christine is here. Christine or Grant can respond as well. This is an attempt to try and put together a process for dealing with appointments to subcommittees, members of subcommittees, as well as the chair of the committee. And there is also a recommendation in here to appoint while we're going through the process of conforming how we will go about appointing chairs and members of subcommittee, that Maureen be appointed to the QTech committee. I think, given that Carrie has vacated that spot, I think it is quite appropriate for Maureen to be in that subcommittee, and Maureen has expressed an interest in so doing. So I'll open up the floor for any questions that you might have on the process itself and on the specific recommendations.
Just as the chair of the QTech, I think Maureen would be a wonderful addition, and really I'm pleased if we could move on that, because I think it's a small committee with a lot of work. So just wanted to say that we welcome Maureen's input.
Thanks, Linda.
Thanks. I see Councillor Cristianti has joined us. Welcome, sir.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, so if there are no questions, I will move to get the resolution approved. I'll read the resolution. Be it resolved that the Board of Directors, number 1, review and approve the selection and appointment process for board committee membership and committee chair contained in attachment 1 to this report. And secondly, that the Board of Directors appoint Maureen Clohessy as member of the Quality and Tenant Engagement Committee on an interim basis, effective August 3rd, 2023, until the selection and appointment process for board committee membership and committee chair is approved and implemented by the board. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you very much, Warren. Seconder, please. Thanks, Councillor. All in favor? Any opposed? That is approved. We're just ticking along here. Warren, we might get you out of here before 11 o'clock.
That's right. You're doing a good job, Mr. Chair.
Okay, move on to item number 10, the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee report. Lawrence, I'll hand it over to you to set this up.
Where's my tea?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Audit, Finance and Risk Committee met on May 25th and reviewed the 2023 Q1 financial statements, reconciliation of expenses charged by TSHC to TSHC, and transfer of post-retirement obligations and vacation and leave time to TSHC by TSHC. The CEO provided a verbal update on the strategic financial sustainability planning exercise by EY. Next, Vince will be presenting the Q1 results to the board.
Just before Vince presents, I just want to recognize Councillor Pasternak, who is here with us as well. Welcome, Councillor.
Oh, good morning, everybody. Good to be here.
Thanks. Vince, floor is yours.
Great. Good morning, board members, and welcome to the August 3rd board meetings. And today I'm going to present to you the financial for the first quarter of 2023. If you can go through your package, and in the package you should see there is a two attachment with the report. One of them includes a statement of operations, which we will go through right now. Through March 31st, 2023, TSHC incurred operating expenses of $10,606,403. Revenue amounted to $10,652,684, composed of $1,296,015 from the City of Toronto city grant deferred. And then there's also the $9.282 million from TSHC as part of the TSHC rental units as part of the transition agreement. And on top of that, we will also receive $74,669 of interest income earned through the bank, resulting in a surplus of $46,281. Expenses incurred were for staff compensations and benefit, TSHC lead consultants, legal services, and other third-party vendors, insurance and other miscellaneous costs, and shared service paid to CHC as part of the service delivery agreement. The city revenue grant is recognized at $1.296015 million. This is an unbudgeted and carry forward deferred grant from the prior year. The positive variance is a result of the city deferred grant. Without the deferred grant, the position would have been at a negative variance or loss for the first 3 months of the year. The shortfall in the first quarter will even out as a balance of the year, balanced by the end of the year. Higher expenses in salaries and benefits, resulting in about $202,343,000, is a result of the impact of the average of a 2.5% merit increase, which was not included in the original budget. One-time payout of unused vacation from prior years that was initially done in the beginning of the year. And then there was also the salary adjustment to bring them in line with similar work and responsibilities across the organization. Professional services were also higher by $177,553 to fill vacant positions and project requirements due to the late hiring of the open corporate positions. The above increase in expense is offset by temporary lower expenditure in tenant translation, tenant engagement, training, development, office expenses, and other operating costs, which are expected to catch up as the month progresses. But for now, it is at a lower expenditure for the first quarter of the year. Revenue recognition for corporate operations expenses are recognized when expenditures are incurred. And as you can look through the income statement, the revenue from expenses was $28,388. So right now I'm going to discuss a little bit more on the statement of operation, which shows you the balance sheet account. On the cash account, we have $4.626 million, accounts receivable $341,000, and then due from TSHC $1.2 million for short term. And then there's a prepaid expenses of $437,000, mainly on the insurance piece. And then we also have the long-term due from TSHC, which is the post-retirement benefits and amount that is a long-term and is $4.180 million. And that's is going to be sitting there for a bit. Fixed asset, we made some major equipment in the organization for $25,000. And then on top of it, we've got the accounts payable consisting of $441,000 for $4.418 million. I apologize. And the first city grant funding of remaining of $2,021 million. And then the employee benefits, which is post-retirements that we've recognized in the first 3 months of the year of $4.174 million. In terms of the accounts payable, the main thing on the accounts payable there consisted of $1.592 million in payroll. Pensioners and benefits, it's about $452,000, and HST payable of about $402,000. Interim staff, second employees, and other vendor payables are consisted of about $339,000, and then payable to TSHC is $1.631 million, as you might have seen that, and that is the surplus from 2022. That, Mr. Chair, is all is the financial statement for the first quarter. Thank you.
Are there any questions? I have one, but I'll wait until I get through questions from committee members. Vin, sorry, go ahead, Brenda.
No, go ahead.
I was going to ask about the deferred the employee benefits that listed there as $4 million. Is that the overall contingent liability? I mean, I find it excessive to be listed in the fourth quarter statement.
Yeah, so that is the post-retirement obligation that when the organization was transferred on June the 1st.
That's fine. I understand that. I was just wondering why we were sort of listing it as a. But I guess it's a constant that we would carry forward in each of our statements, right?
Correct. Mr. the Chair, you will see that sitting in there until the balance will be fully resolved.
Okay.
So yes, correct.
All right, great. Thanks. Brenda, go ahead.
Just clarification. In your narrative section here, due from Toronto Community Housing, 1.2 million. When you say due from them, you're talking about the monthly, not the monthly draw. What do we call it? We call it a grant. No, that's the transference of rental revenue to us, right? Is that what that is?
Yeah. So this one is considered to be an short-term accounts receivable, and this is the amount that on June the 1st, there's two lines on the financials that was transferred over. One is what we consider to be vacation and leave time, which is deemed to be a temporary and which normally settles in the first year or the year that it incur, and typically that would be within the first 12 months. So that was what we consider to be short-term receivable, and so we listed as due from TSHC at $1.2 million. The other one is a long-term, but it is also an accounts receivable, and that's for more of the post-retirement, like I mentioned to the chair earlier. That will be sitting on the book much longer. For the due from TSHC, $1.2 million, we did receive that in the second quarter, so you will not see that in the next follow-up meeting.
I see. Okay, thank you. And have we been accepted by Canada Revenue or the GST? Yes, we have been. Okay.
Yes. So I believe through the chair, we have provided some information earlier. As of March 31st, at the end of first quarter, the CRA has accepted our application as HSC exempt. And in that quarter as well, we also applied for the credit, which amount to about $199,000 that we received back, dating back to 2021 and 2022 of all the expenses that of the HST expenses that we have incurred. And that, as I mentioned, that's about $199,000 of credit that we received back, and that would have come through in the April filing of the HST with the CRA.
Okay, and that HST is on purchases of goods and services?
Correct, correct.
Yeah, okay. And I think that was it.
Okay, are there any other questions? Okay, Councillor Pasternak, go ahead.
Great, thank you. And I'm not sure whether this would fall under this report, but I wonder if you can update us on the buildings that pay property taxes and its impact on the Trillium benefits of residents. I imagine this is a CFO kind of responsibility to kind of track that. And I'm just wondering whether there's anything, any updates you can give the board. We still get a trickling of complaints of people cut off from Trillium and people who have to make back payments. So anything you can share on that, or
Can you explain what that is?
Sure. It's my understanding, and I'm not an accountant, that under new CRA rules, or rules that have been in place for some time, those buildings that are paying property taxes impact the recipients of Trillium benefits.
Oh, right. Now I
So-
remember. Yes, thank
So
you.
we get a trickling of, and they get these nasty letters from CRA, which of course is federal jurisdiction, asking them sometime, telling them their benefits are going to be cut off, or that they owe back money, which is even worse.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure whether this is the appropriate time to ask for any updates on this, but certainly when you get your financial statements presented, it seems like a logical time to ask.
Okay, so I'll have Jim and thanks, Councillor. I'll have Jim pose his question, then I'll ask Grant to respond, and Vince can supplement that. Go ahead, Jim.
Just wondering if any of the money that was announced by the federal finance minister for the city of Toronto towards giving money, they gave, I think it was $95,000 to the city towards supporting the incoming immigrants and refugees. Was any of that given to TSHC?
Okay, I'll have thanks, Jim. My direct response would be no, but I'll let staff provide that response. Grant, you want to respond to the Trillium benefit issue and CRA before we get into the response to Jim?
Sure. I'll give a sort of a high level response. So we are aware of this issue, and essentially because the city, I believe it was about 10 or 12 years ago, deemed a number of buildings tax exempt, so they don't pay property taxes, as Councillor Pasternak mentioned. That is a criteria that is part of your application for Trillium benefits as to whether the building you live in is subject to paying property tax or not. So it was not at the time that the exemption was put in place. I don't think it was fully understood that that was actually in effect back in 2012 or 2011, I think, when the city did that. Subsequently, a few years ago, not recently, but it's still an issue, as Councillor Pasternak notes, I think it was in 2020, the CRA started becoming more engaged, not just with Toronto Community Housing at the time, but social housing providers across the province on auditing files around this with tenants in their buildings, and started to contact tenants once they understood that they may not have been eligible for the Trillium benefit, and we're looking to potentially claw that back, which is what Councillor Pasternak is talking about. And that issue became significant for many tenants in both TSHC, TCHC. We heard about it from Ottawa Housing and other housing providers as well in the province. At the time, there was some advocacy done to approach the CRA and look for some consideration of the situation that our tenants are in already in asking for this. However, the relationship between the CRA and tenants around taxes is an individual relationship that exists between the tenants and the CRA. It's not something that we specifically are part of. So what have we done to try to address this is to continue to focus on ensuring that tenants have information available to them to support the their tax when they do their taxes, and that includes information that our senior services coordinators can provide to tenants, information on the website about this so they can see which buildings are exempt, and all of our buildings are exempt. So it applies in all buildings. And then we also, we do also look to connect tenants with tax clinics and supports for, how their tax situations can be addressed so they can specifically work on their individual situation. It's not necessarily a one size fits all, although we have heard about this issue. The general response that the CRA is provided to us is that they will work on these cases on a case by case basis. So there is information available. We can take an action if you'd like to sort of summarize what we've done on this and review that, if that might help the board to have a bit more context and put together maybe a briefing note or something for the board.
Yeah, thanks, Grant. I think the one recommendation or one consideration I would put before the board as well is that it may not hurt for us to provide a coordinated. It doesn't have to be a response to CRA that addresses specific tenants, but I don't know if it's worthwhile for the city or the TCHC and TSHC to send a joint letter to the CRA, just explaining the circumstances under which our tenant operates. So we're not dealing with specific issues that tenant may have to deal with in their interaction with the CRA, but we can, at a minimum, put this in the public realm. That might be something that might be worth it. It might also be worth it, Arlene, for us to consider some kind of a media op-ed on some of this as well. So we're not just kind of leaving it to tenant individual interaction with the CRA, but we can posit it within a broader context. So I just table that. I'm not going to require a motion, but I would ask staff to sort of think about whether that might be a consideration for us to look at with TCHC and perhaps also with the City of Toronto and other housing providers as well. Grant.
So through Chair Fareed, so the TCHC has done that. They have put together and communicated with the CRA the specifics of this, and that was done a couple of years ago. We could look back with TCH as well and see if they're interested and would consider doing something further. And so they did advocate, and we were part of that in context at the time as well with the seniors part of their file. So that advocacy has been undertaken to try to convince the CRA to be flexible to how to deal with these situations, and that was their response. And we also advocated with other housing providers as well. So it was something we reached out to other housing providers to see what they were doing too.
Thanks, Councillor Pasternak. I saw you had your hand up.
I would simply suggest and that there be a staff undertaking or a board undertaking to once again reiterate our concerns about this matter. I must admit, I failed to see the connection between tax exemption and individual seniors losing their benefits or having to repay benefits. I just failed to see, and I've spoken to my local MP about it, and I spoke to the former mayor about it. And it's just a puzzle. And who could have predicted that if we changed the tax status of buildings, that it would have this impact? So, yeah, I think we have to revisit our advocacy. Certainly, if and I'm only getting a trickling of complaints. I don't know what's going across the system, but we should revisit our advocacy. Although I think the federal government's tired of the city. Sort of, I don't want to say complaining, but we have been quite vocal about the lack of federal support on the fiscal side. But I see no harm in fighting for seniors and fighting for our residents.
Okay, thanks. So perhaps, Grant, based on Councillor's suggestions and the idea I put forward, it may be worthwhile for us to bring forward a report to the board on what additional steps we can take to deal with enhanced advocacy to raise this issue again in the public realm. Brenda.
It was just a question. Is it because CRA views this as double dipping in the sense that they give you, tax exempt on one hand, and then if they give another benefit to the tenant? I mean, I'm just trying to understand if it's even understandable, because sometimes these things aren't.
So through the chair, if I could respond.
Yes.
There are specific criteria for applying for the Trillium benefit. And one of them has to do with the tax status of your property.
Yes.
So you have to identify the tax status of your property in the application process.
Okay. Okay.
How the CRA interprets once they get your application and then further assesses that, I'm not in a position to speak to that.
Yeah.
However, there is criteria that is in the application process that requires this information, and then they assess that based on, I think, not just that individual component, but also your overall tax and other components around your application. So it's not just about tax exemption. So there is a process, and it's usually part of your tax return where you indicate this. So
because there's a case could be made here. I mean, you're talking about penalizing those who have the least, and this is significant. This is hundreds of dollars, right, every year. I mean, if I'm going by the tax preparation I do for my son and sisters and stuff.
Yes.
And I think it's obviously, it may not be us, but I think I would agree with Councillor Pasternak on this, but it seems to me this is something that's could be in conjunction with other groups. I don't know if anyone viewing this as an issue, but thank you very much.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks, Brandon. I don't think it hurts us doing a bit of advocacy. So we need to, Vince, I see your hand is up. Any additional comments?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to respond back to Jim as well regarding the funding from the federal government that came in.
Thanks.
We actually did not receive anything from that. I mean, typically, the funding works is that it's complete at the beginning of the year, and anything that flows throughout the year, unless it's a one-time funding or one-time adjustments, it will come in. But unfortunately, the $95 million from the federal government did not resolve into the TSHC or TCHC to that matter as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Vince. And I also want to thank Jim. I know Jim has been quite vocal in his advocacy role to secure funding on behalf of seniors that live in our building. So Jim, thank you for your advocacy role. And I know sometimes it's a lot of heavy lifting, but being persistent, I think, would eventually pay off. So thank you for the work that you do outside of the committee. Just to circle back on the Trillium benefit and tax exempt issue, just to reiterate that the board is asking staff to come back with some recommendations on an enhanced advocacy to put this back in the public realm, and perhaps some options on what we can do in concert with other housing providers to make the federal government aware of our position again on this particular issue. It's
a charter issue, you realize. I mean, it's the denial of benefits to a particular segment, and I don't know if we'll be the one to take the case to the court, but someone should, because I see this as slam dunk. I mean, you go to the tax court. I mean, the impact, it's the consequential impact of a policy. And it's
thanks, Brenda. Okay, so thanks, folks. That was a really good conversation, and thanks, Councillor, for bringing this to our attention. Okay, if there were no other questions on item number 10, we'll move on to item number 11. We have a deputant, but I'll let Linda, who is our hardworking chair of the Quality and Tenant Engagement Committee, set this up, and then Brad will make his presentation. But before Arlene speaks, I'll invite Bill to depute. So, Ms. Jackson, over to you.
Thank you. And you can cue me when, in terms of when Bill's coming on, and I know you're going to manage this part of the agenda, but you're right. Actually, I give credit to the Quality and the Tenant Engagement Committee that has been very active. And before that, I just want to thank actually the councillor and Grant for educating me on an issue that I had no knowledge of. So thank you for that robust conversation, because it's about tenant engagement. So thank you about that. Just a quick update, and then we're going to have a pretty meaty, some meaty presentations. The Quality and Tenant Engagement Committee has met twice since the last board meeting on May 9th and July 17th. In these meetings, we regularly have good engagement with our CEO and a big focus on the tenant experience and within his report. Our dashboard is coming along very nicely, and you will see that today. But this dashboard is actually reviewed in some detail at every meeting. Another piece of work that we've been following closely is our partnerships. I know that people are very interested in our partnerships because it actually translates into services in the building, and we are getting more and more reports on this work, and we'll be sharing some of that. And actually in our May meeting, because of the volume of work underway, we actually decided to have that July meeting, which is great. So what we're going to be talking about today is flowing from that July 17th meeting, where we got an update on the tenant engagement process, timelines, and working forward with that. As you know, we were supporting work with the tenant board directors to co-sponsor the tenant engagement co-design work, which we're really excited about. And that's why I'm really excited to have Maureen join our committee too, because our tenant board members, I can't stress how important they have been. Carrie, Maureen, Jim are doing a lot of the work to actually bridge between our committee, our board committee, and the tenants and staff. So we're pleased about that. The committee asked staff going forward to try to get some things going and not get stuck. You know, we have heard that in this at this board level too, that I actually look back in the last year, and I truly cannot believe all of the work that has been done. We've been receiving a lot of reports, and there's been a lot of information. And while that's actually laid a really great groundwork, we were actually, advised, don't get too stuck in over analyzing and over presenting things. Let's get things moving. We've heard, we have heard from the tenants, and I give Tom a lot of credit for all of the work that he has done to being in all of the buildings and with the team to actually understand what the tenant messages are, and they're becoming clearer and clearer. So in this meeting, we will have Brad. Arlene's going to provide a summary of that work of tenant engagement. We're going to look at the operational dashboard. We're pleased to actually be moving forward on the tenant experience survey, and we'll be talking about the survey plans going forward. And without further ado, I think I'm going to let us move to the agenda items. But just want to thank the committee and the staff who have been very focused on this work in the last little while.
Yeah, thanks, Linda, and thanks again for your leadership on this committee. Brad?
Thanks, Linda, and through the chair. The operational dashboard that was reviewed at the QTE meeting was for the period of ending May 2023. Just to take you through some of the highlights, we had an overall reduction in the receivable due to the corporation from arrears. That you can see the reduction in the graph in the top left corner, as well as the spike in the red line at 831, which is the number of households that are within the arrears collection process. The bottom graph represents that we've had an increase in our overall service levels to the residents in completion of work orders. Our completion of administrative requests has remained relatively flat, and the number of vacant units did increase to May and exceeded the service manager target of 2%. Happy to say that for June, we went back under that 2% level and saw a further decrease at the end of July already. With regards to arrears, we continue to manage arrears. Through the arrears collection process, we had an overall decrease of $53,000 from April, and this is due to staff working with tenants to get them through the arrears collection process and ensure that they're dealt with in a quick manner. the average account when that is not managed within the arrears collection process is reduced to $320, which is an indicator that staff are definitely getting tenants the help that they need in order to get their tenancy back on track. With regards to vacancy, as I mentioned, we did have an increase and exceeded. We went up to 2.8% for the month of May. However, we had double the number of move-outs that we had for previous months, and staff have worked diligently to reduce that. And we're now at the end of July, have gone back down to sub 2%, and they're at 1.94% for the month ending July 2023. With regards to work orders, staff received 8,795 work orders. The majority of them were with regards to pest control, which go into a little more detail in the next couple of slides. Overall, staff are completing 91% of their work orders within 2 business days and resolving issues for tenants in an extremely timely manner. Pest control, as I mentioned, staff dealt with 828 pest treatments. We had 166 units declared bedbug free and 158 units were declared cockroach free. And we continue to implement our environmental health protocols and our environmental health team. We did have a delay in some of the quality improvement project outputs that we were trying to put in place. There was an expiration of the pest vendor contract, which TSHC has since extended for 12 months, which gives us uncertainty over the next year while there's an RFP that's being done. And I'm pleased to advise the board that the results of our quality improvement project are being included into that RFP, so that some of the voices and some of the things that we heard from our residents and our staff will be incorporated and will be contractually obligations under the terms of the new deal with our vendors.
Good.
Administrative requests, staff processed just short of 2,000 administrative requests, most of them with regards to documentation support, the end of tax season, and a lot of people are having their rent guarantee income recalculated. And as a result, staff saw a bit of an upsurge during March, and now we're just getting that backlog resolved. Community safety incidents, continue to work with the CSU. We've actually met with the community safety unit with regards to the outcomes of the quality improvement project on safety and security, and look forward to implementing some of those, as well as working with our community safety unit partners to reformat how we present these to the board based on feedback from previous meetings. And that brings us to the end of the dashboard, if anybody has any questions.
Thanks, Brad. Are there any questions for Brad or Linda?
Just a quick question on the community safety incidents. It doesn't look like there were any serious violent incidents.
Through the chair, thankfully, no, we haven't had any.
Okay.
A lot of the incidents that we've been experiencing that are tracked, that dashboard doesn't account for the difference between positive incidents and negative incidents. So things like the CSU officers doing preemptive patrols and attending building meetings and staff meetings with tenants go as into that total, and it's something that we're working on separating out in the new dashboard.
I'm asking this because the whole issue of perception of unsafety versus actuality, right? There's lots of research on this, how people often feel, the city is unsafe, and if you drill down, the numbers are actually quite low. So I don't know if this is the right indicator, but it'd be interesting to kind of tease out some of this information to get a sense of, are there any safety issues that we need to be worried about, or in terms of managing expectations, right?
Brenda, we might get some of that in the tenant survey. So this
that's true.
Our data that is actually, because I think we're trying to actually present this at a rather high level and not actually overwhelm people with a lot of content. But it's a good point.
Yeah, and it's hard to. It's like a nuanced thing, isn't it? One person's aggression is not another person's. So I just thought, because people do feel a sense of being bothered at the doorway by strangers wanting to come in, anxiety about, I heard Kenneth talk about the need for 24, which we can't afford, obviously, 24-hour security, but and some buildings that we know are highlighted as being of more concern than others. But I just want to make sure we don't lose sight of people's feelings and perceptions of safety.
Yeah, and we do actually have this in the QUIP too. So this is again, this is our dashboard that gives the data, but we do actually have some of that content as well that we're going to get into.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Crisanti.
Yes, thank you. Just had to unmute myself. So if we could just go back to slide 4 for a moment.
Which one's that?
Slide 4 is the vacancy rate
Oh, yes.
slide. So maybe you could explain. I don't quite understand the wording. First of all, it says in May there were 8 less move-ins and 12 less move-outs when compared to April. So when there is a move-out, and these are seniors, where do they move out to? This is their home. What happens? And
nursing home.
And what's the expectation on the move-in?
Through the chair, when our residents move out, generally they move to long-term care facilities.
Yeah.
We have an extensive waiting list. The city has, I believe, just over 5,000 long-term care beds for tenants, and our residents are generally going there. When a resident moves out, the turnaround standard that we have with the city is 60 days to reoccupancy.
Right.
So if somebody was to move out at the end of May, we would expect that unit to be occupied by August the 1st. And that during that time, we renovate the unit, we complete repairs to the unit, we ensure that the unit's pest-free. Then we go to the city centralized wait list. Rent Cafe is the system that the city uses that we partner with them on in order to find a new applicant off of the RGI wait list for housing.
Okay. Yeah, no, long-term care. Yeah, that makes sense. But so do people move out at times, maybe go back to family or any of that? Or is it generally that's what happens? You know, they get a certain age and whatever, then they have to go to long-term care? Or do you know, though, do we know the reasons why?
Through the chair, we know anecdotally what the reasons would be, but we don't actually track that data as far as where people are going or why they are leaving.
All right. Okay, just one other clarification. When you make reference to the offer accepted category, what do you mean by offer accepted?
Through the chair, so when a unit becomes vacant, it is posted on the city's Rent Cafe. Residents, applicants, at the top of the wait list receive an email and are allowed to bid on the unit. If you're on the city social housing wait list, you would receive an email advising you that we have a unit in a building with photos and a description of the building as well as the unit. You would then accept that offer, which means that staff would then call you to arrange a viewing of the unit as well as a lease signing of the unit.
Okay, so so these are people interested in moving in, submitting an offer and a request to move in, and then there's a due diligence period, and then we decide whether we're going to accept or not accept a specific offer.
Through the chair, the only criteria that we have to not accept an offer from an applicant is if they currently owe another housing provider in the Ontario, a social housing provider within Ontario, rental arrears. The city determines eligibility for somebody to be on the wait list.
Yeah.
Okay, makes sense. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Councillor. Thanks, Brad. Have Maureen. Maureen, go ahead, please. You might be on mute, Maureen.
Thank you. A couple of questions for Brad. Just in regards to what Councillor Crisanti just said, I think I think often what happens that none of us want to actually talk about right here is that there are more people that pass away in their apartments than there are that actually move to old age homes. And I think it would be interesting to track how many people actually reach the end of their life in their unit. Especially since we're in a new model around aging. I think those would be interesting statistics. it would maybe help us to look at why that's happening, and are there patterns to that type of thing where the care is not provided or whatever it might be. The other question I have is around the work orders for Brad. When it says 90% complete, I really would like to have a better understanding of what complete is. Does it mean that the staff have gotten back to the tenant and said, all right, I'll order the supplies, or does it mean the problem is completely resolved and finished? I'd like to see more definition, or maybe you could explain to me what that means, please.
Yeah, through the chair, we track work orders and the completion of them in various ways within the Homes platform. When a work with the 91%, that refers to the staff work orders that are completed by our in-house 416 staff, and they complete the work order. And when I say complete, I mean that the taps are fixed, the toilet is no longer running, the closet doors are rehung at a rate of 91% within 2 business days. Where we have a lower standard of turnover is with our vendor work orders. They actually completed about a 30% completion rate within 5 business days. And that's something that we're working with TSHC to bring up and get that to an acceptable level.
Okay, thank you.
And what these vendors are, what, the pest people and the, when you say vendors, which ones are they?
Through the chair, these are general contractors, so it might be the pet vendor. It could be somebody replacing a bathtub. It could be somebody replacing an entire kitchen, windows, etc.
Okay.
Right. Councilor Crisanti, your virtual hand is still up. Do you want to pursue this further, or you're good? Okay, thank you. All right, thanks, Brad. Thanks, folks. That was a good discussion. Thanks, Maureen, for your input as well. We will move to our deputant. Bill Lohman is in the house. I will invite Bill to speak now, so we don't keep him waiting any longer than he has to. So, Bill, if you'd like to speak, you've got 5 minutes, starting now.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. And to begin, I'd like to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for following through on your request to have a conversation with me. Although we didn't resolve many things, it was certainly appreciated. And I would also like to welcome my friend and new tenant director, Maureen, and looking forward to your insights on the board as they have been at with the staff committee. I would like to comment today on a few things because, of course, I try to speak for tenants or where I see tenants missing. And at Saranac, we have been really involved in the different aspects of the programs and partnerships with the Northwest team, the medical end, and with the Red Cross, and we've been very active, and we were involved in creating a roundtable to to try to bring these discussions and these different programs and partnerships together with a tenant voice involved. And I think in many ways that has been very effective and it's been useful. But there have been some drawbacks too. And that is that while we've had this table of discussion and we've had the opportunity to be participants, there has been ongoing conversation and decisions made without tenants being involved. This is at the table of deciding what's going to be happening with our community room. And so there's a bit of an issue there where tenants are trying to have a voice, but there is there's a decision-making process that's outside that is talking with policies and making decisions about the use of our space without us being involved or without us even knowing. So this is something that we've been trying to work on, and I know that there is progress being made. It's just that these things seem to come along slowly. I think one of the things, very interesting conversation earlier, and I really appreciate the insights that are coming forward. It's important to note here that while these programs and partnerships have been developing and finding ways to start connecting with tenants, tenants are still remain isolated and siloed. We still have very little contact with each other. And so we've seen the agencies and the programs and the partnerships being developed, and seniors are still sitting with very little input activity other than the flyers and the efforts coming in from agencies. So the big question here is, what exactly is housing's role in this? Because it seems that housing is the decider, but it also looks like housing is using proxies to engage with tenants and not actually being involved themselves. So I know that there is an engagement model that we are working on, but we are supposed to be partners in this process as well. And when you look at the way the department is set up, it doesn't even mention tenants. We used to have tenant services committee, and now it's programs and partnerships, and tenants aren't even mentioned. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. As always, we do appreciate your comment. And I think one of the things that we strive to do at this committee is to strengthen tenant engagement. And if that's not resonating with our seniors and our tenants, then I think we've got to look at how better we can engage them. The issue around community, the use of community rooms, I think in particular is something that I suspect we would need to do a better job at. And, we had a meaningful conversation a few weeks ago, and I don't know, Grant, if you or anyone else would like to respond to this, but I think on the issue of space and the use of space in particular, if some of these issues are not being addressed at any of our formal tables, then what else can we do to ensure that tenants are engaged? Go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, thank you, Fareed. So through the chair, so a couple of things, and I know in a moment Arlene's going to go through an update on the programs and partnership, and I think you'll get a bit more context and perspective as to the types of things that are going on and upcoming, and how we're trying to align in with other projects like the tenant engagement work, for example, the new model. Specific to use of space and what Bill is talking about, there is an initiative underway right now to look at the use of space policy for Toronto Seniors Housing Corporation. And this is the policy we have today is really a carryover of a policy that was, pre-transition, similar to what TSHC had or has. And we're looking at how we might revise that. So some work was done, some updates have been provided at Quality and Tenant Engagement Committee on that work. In the last meeting, for example, we did provide an update and a report on that. And that's work that is done together with for example, the Senior Tenant Advisory Committee. So we are working on that, and we do acknowledge and recognize the importance of tenants having a voice in how the spaces in their buildings are used and how they have a voice in, and input and decisions around that. So that will be part of the discussion there, and will continue. And I think you'll hear more about it in a few moments when Arlene has a chance to work through the program and partnership update.
Yes, thanks, Grant. I recognize Brenda and then Linda. Brenda, go ahead.
Yes, there'll probably be comments later on in the other presentation. So what I want to just stress is let us not lose sight of this issue of social isolation and the quality of life measures. of day-to-day living and how people feel engaged with their neighbors, themselves, their building. So let's just make sure, with all the discussion about partnerships and use of space and all those things, that core here is, I don't want to lose sight of Bill's, Mr. Loman's comment about this issue of feeling isolated and siloed. I think we need to come back to that. That's all.
Thanks, Brenda. Great point. Linda?
Yeah, just very briefly acknowledging Bill's comments. I think actually some of the issues will be addressed in the presentations from Arlene and the many activities that are underway that kind of are interconnected. So hopefully we can kind of hear a little bit about that, and that we will keep what we're learning is this is work in progress. We have not reached the destination, but we need to continue to hear your voice and other tenants' voices. So thanks, Bill.
Yeah, thanks. And again, Bill, thank you for bringing these matters to our attention. We obviously appreciate your insight. And as Linda and Grant and others have indicated, this is work in progress, and we've got to try and do a much better job at realizing some of those expectations that our tenants might have, and our obligations to engage them in a more meaningful way. I know, Bill, if you're still there, you've got a second deputation that you would like to offer the board. Do you want to do that now before we get into the presentation, or are you prepared to wait until Arlene goes through her presentation before you make your second depute?
Oh, no, thank you. I will I'd be happy to wait.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so if there are no other discussion on that particular item, we'll move to Arlene's presentation. Arlene, over to you.
Thank you, through the chair. And thank you, Mr. Loman, for your deputation and the points that you raised. Apparently, I'm going to try and answer many of the points through my presentation. So I wanted to just just touch down on a few areas. I'm not going to go through the slide deck. You've got that for reference. I'm going to talk about our programs and partnership work, our regional health and wellness supports and service alignment, the work that we're doing in our tenant action funds, and then what we're sort of going to focus on moving forward. This presentation was previously provided at the May QTE meeting, and so I'm just going to highlight some of the key things I think the board might want to be aware of. So since transitioning to the new corporation in the area of programs and partnership, we've been focused on renewing and establishing new partnership agreements, and our goal is to revitalize the community programming that has been on pause for 2 years because of COVID restrictions, and that speaks to Bill's comments about the isolation issues that continues to be felt by many senior tenants. We currently have 144 reoccurring programs offered by tenants and agency partners that include social, recreation, food security, along with health and wellness programs across 46 buildings. So we do have a fair number of programs running. I think one of the things that I continue to hear that because we are an independent living housing corporation, some tenants wish to be engaged and some do not. So there's a little bit of trying to balance the needs of the various populations that we serve. We're collaborating with tenants to develop the engagement opportunities while supporting tenant-led programs and initiatives. So we're supporting this by offering funding through the Tenant Activity Fund, through offering coordination support, and then access to common areas to better facilitate tenant community programming. So to Bill's point about, use of space, when we come upon the use of space issues in buildings, really before any agencies are brought in, there's a conversation that happens where a senior services coordinator will be told by a tenant, I would like to have, or we want to do, and then that conversation usually involves defining whether that program or whatever the tenant is suggesting is a program that needs to be community-led. So do we need to bring someone in to help support you, or do you want to do that on your own, and then we can help you to do that programming? So there's two slightly different flavors to bringing programs into buildings, but when programs are coming in, generally we're trying very hard to make sure we're having that conversation with tenants through senior services coordinators and now community service coordinators to be able to identify what tenant wants and how they want to have those programs delivered. As it relates to regional health, wellness, and supports, we've been working with regional health and community support agencies over the past years to improve service alignment to better address needs. We've established a collaborative partnership with Baycrest, and you would see that earlier this month, we sent out a notice about the partnership with Baycrest, where they're offering services in 4 buildings currently, looking to expand those services to 4 other buildings. And we're developing partnerships like this to include engagement with tenants to get input from them about what they want and how they want those programs to address their needs. And we are looking forward to continuing to work with regional health service providers to expand their efforts across the city. One of the things that we're trying to focus on in the area of programs and partnerships is to look at working with the ISM table, the ISM strategy table, to be able to have conversations about how do we bring equitable service across the city, because in some regions, some buildings might have might have a heavy service delivery, whereas others may not have as much. So we're trying to find a more equitable approach to that. And then in our Tenant Action Fund consultation, we have been meeting with STAC members to understand from them what they would like to see on our Tenant Action Fund moving forward. To date, we have successfully approved 72 Tenant Action Fund applications and dispersed $61,000 towards the efforts of helping tenants put in programs in 2022. And in 2023, it's been $32,000 in funding to help tenants put programs in place as well. Our tenant fund distribution policy, or Tenant Action Fund, where we are actually taking that revised approach to STAC on Wednesday, August the 9th, which is next week, to get their input once again towards how they would like to see that process move forward for tenants, and does it actually represent all the feedback that we have received from STAC, from tenants in the past. So I just wanted to touch down on that's the process we're using to try and come up with policies, particularly this Tenant Action Fund policy, which is very near and dear to the heart of many tenants. Moving forward, our key objective is to conduct community needs survey for better program alignment and increase the number of on-site programs that we provide to ensure the equitable access. One of the undertakings that we have had since putting together the report, I wanted to just brief you on, is the Toronto Public Library. We've been partnering with them over the past 2 years to offer community librarian programming within 2 buildings per region every year. And they're continuing to offer their community librarian programs across 4 buildings for the remainder of the year, and we'll be offering permanent resources to support buildings in the new year. The community librarians will continue to provide tenant engagement, digital literacy training through laptop distribution, and scheduled training sessions with offering linkages to Toronto Public Library programs. TPL is also expanding their program at 71 Merton, where the North Toronto Ontario Health teams and the neighborhood care teams are offering tenants without access to functioning equipment. They're offering both digital literacy training and program events, and trying to connect them with virtually with health and social services. And once their training is complete, they're offering to leave the technology that they're training people on with them, so that they have that technology available to them. So this is some of the work that's underway to try and strengthen the independence of tenants in our community. We will continue our stakeholder consultation on the use of space policy, and that work is slated to continue till the end of the year. And I think Grant will be talking about that later, because this is a crossover between policy and our team. And then we're trying to give as many diverse groups of tenants a voice in all of the work that we're doing, through particularly the work I'm going to touch down on shortly around the tenant engagement piece. We have been putting in place opportunities to hear from more tenants. We heard from 172 tenants at large, not including tenant leaders or those who are part of the working group in STAC, through our tenant engagement program focus groups that we've held already. So I just wanted you to provide an update on the program and partnership work, and to just note that we are working hard to get this area better set up to be able to support the present and emerging needs of seniors within TSH. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Arlene. And this report is quite timely. Thanks to you and your team for bringing this forward. It's a very comprehensive report. I'm going to open it up for any questions that the directors might have. Maureen, go ahead, and then Brenda.
Thanks, Fareed. Yeah, there's you've mentioned Baycrest and you've mentioned the Toronto Public Libraries, which are both great partners. I don't have all the slides in front of me, but slide 20 to 27, there are lists of where you've got 8 partners. 1, 2, and 3, you're listing the addresses or the locations where they're providing those services. And that includes Baycrest. But then 4 to 8, no addresses are provided. And I think for a long time now, it has been asked a few times if we could get actual locations of where these services are being provided and where they're not yet being provided, so that we could see where the gaps are and then try to figure out why those gaps are there.
Sure.
So those addresses would be appreciated. The other thing too, I noticed we are attempting and we're still working on language here. I know there's you can use service provider, you can use partner or partnership. But I've noticed still once in a while the word agency is being put in there.
Yeah.
And I'd really like to get away from that word, because a lot of the services that tenants ask for are not related to an agency. There might be more community providers that are available for those services. Just a reminder that we don't want that word. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Maureen.
Thanks, Maureen. Language matters. Appreciate that comment. Brenda?
Couple questions on you call it regional health partnership, is that the phrase? With Baycrest. What is our intention about expanding this to other regions and with other partners? So for example, in the East End, it would be probably Scarborough Hospital, Michael Garron, North York General. Is this the model we're going to be using in terms of any health-related service delivery?
Through the chair. So we actually, through the ISM table, I would like to look to establish a conversation with some of the big players. So Baycrest, UHN, perhaps Unity. Unity spans, as many people know, from Scarborough to Hamilton, right?
Yeah,
They've got a pretty wide reach, and UHN is UHN. They've just got a lot of capital in terms of human capital and resources, and Baycrest because of their focus in geriatrics. And so what we'd like to be able to do is to sit down with these large providers to talk about how do we work together to better support things like transition from hospital to home, things like because they're also connected to Ontario Health Teams, and the Ontario Health Teams are connected to the home and community support services. So how do we better access those services in a more coordinated way, and how do we then rebalance services across the city? So we've been speaking with other agencies such as Wood Green about where you've got a high concentration in the southeast, and what's our corollary partner in the northwest, and let's all get together and talk about what are all the services, where are we saturated, where are there gaps, and can we realign, and then where can these larger bodies like UHN, like Baycrest, and like Unity play a part in helping us to resource appropriately. It may sound a little bit like trying to boil the ocean. But I think we have to start somewhere, and we need to get everyone at the table in order to be able to have those conversations in a cohesive way to move forward the work so that it's more coordinated and more equitable across the city. Because what you might need in one building may not be the same in another.
I understand, and I'm quite supportive of this, and I've had some dealings with Baycrest, and I know the quality of services they deliver. But my concern here is this takes a lot of time and energy to negotiate with large-scale health institutions. We can waste a lot of time and a lot of staff time on this. And my concern is, how many years will this take before we actually get delivery in the buildings? Okay. And I come back always to this aging in place, aging, whatever phrase we're using these days. And whether we are getting approval to cooperate from Housing and Community Support Services for on-site personal care services. Because without that, then this is all just talk, because people will stay and age in place in their home if they get those personal care services. Okay. And unless we get some sense of ongoing commitments and upfront commitments, you're going to be spinning your wheels a lot, because everyone will be talky. But bottom line is, how many hours of personal care PSW services are available to that building every day, every week, every month, every year? And I know how hard that is to get commitments from, what the hell they call themselves, HCSS, no, I guess. And I don't want us to get caught up in the fog of interagency cooperation. It's all well and good, but I'm telling you, it's going to be 2 to 3 years before we get another quadrant dealt with. So I'm just highlighting my concern and hope for some, more focused, creative, maybe community-based level delivery. We don't really need unity to necessarily provide those things. It could be any number of other organizations, but I want some urgency to this, because bottom line is, if it's not personal care, then we can fiddle till the cows come home, right? And it's the hardest thing to get. Okay, my second point on tenant action funds. Can you tell me how long, or someone tell me how long it takes for a request to be approved? So if someone wants to do a barbecue, how many months is it taking to get that approval for the money?
Through the chair, Brenda, may I address your first point, or would you prefer me to address your second point?
Doesn't matter.
I'll start with your first point. So there is, just to clarify, there is concurrent work going on with all of these organizations to provide on-the-ground care right now. So it's not as though nothing is going on with Unity or nothing is going on with UHN or Baycrest.
Right.
So there is on-the-ground work. This is the other level of work to try to get the coordinated piece.
Yeah.
Through Michael Guerin, we're getting support for discharge for hospital to home through UHN. They can tell us that 80 of our 83 buildings currently use the services of UHN, and our tenants that are using the services at UHN are using it 40% more than the average person in the city of Toronto, particularly their emergency room, their emergency room services, right? So,
yeah.
So there is work going on. UHN is doing the NORC Ambassador program. There is, I just wanted to articulate that we're not sort of hurrying up and waiting.
Yeah,
We've got concurrent work going on over here.
Yes.
While we try to build out what the future could look like. So I wanted to stress that.
Yes.
So hopefully that allays your fears that we're not doing nothing.
Yeah. I know.
And then to answer your second question about TAP applications, presently we're doing within 30 days, we're trying to turn around a TAP application. In fact, we get TAP applications right now weekly, and they're reviewed weekly. And that process, actually, we'd like to see that improved and changed, and that's what we're going to stack to get input on next week. But we're moving very quickly to get applications approved and funds out the door, so that we can make sure that tenants are having activities when they're asking for. It is not a perfect system. It is not a perfect system.
And it's centrally decided, right? The application, yes.
And one of the things, I want to make sure that we're very transparent on is that we want our future system to make sure that the tenant voices are included in it. At this point, because of the way that interim process was designed at the end of last year, to do things quickly, that was not something that we were able to put in place. But with the move forward system, we want that to be managed, and we set with tenant voices in the decision making, their programs, their buildings, their voices.
And is there any sense that we'll be doing a certain amount of money per building, just flat out say every building has $5,000 they can work with? We had talked about that last year sometime.
Yeah, I think what you'll see coming back to the board at the next meeting is something that looks more like a slide and scale format, dependent on if we are able to get some consensus around this. It's the blunt instrument of $500 a building or $3,000 a building may not actually meet the needs of all of equitably meet the needs across the board. So we're looking at a model that does takes an equitable approach to supporting tenants.
That's why I'm saying it will make it more equitable if you have a dollar amount per building, because then everyone knows they have access to money for any holiday celebrations, barbecues. Those are the things that build community and a sense of social connectedness. So
correct.
I just don't want to lose the nuanced part of this while we look at systems. I mean, I want to get the money out the door and into people's hands to have activities so they can meet each other over coffee quarterly. I want a quarterly event in every building just for social engagement purposes. There's no reason why we can't do an afternoon tea every quarter, a barbecue, whatever, whatever floats people's boats. But I'm linking this, of course, to the social isolation issue, which is considered the number one health issue right now for seniors.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn.
Thanks, Arlene, and thanks for that response. I mean, obviously, the concurrency of work that you're doing is really, really critical, and I think we'll look forward to getting a report back on how we allocate funding, because a pure, straight, equal allocation may not be equitable. So we'll come back and have that conversation. Linda, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll be brief. I just wanted to say that I appreciate the progress we're making in the partnership work. And I think what's important is that we're actually building on a momentum that is in the community already, and that we're not actually, I think we don't always do that as these kinds of organizations where there's a lot happening. The city is divided into Ontario Health Team regions. There's organizations that are working together, and we're joining those partnerships rather than starting from scratch and saying this is what we're building. And we're remembering our mandate. We don't actually have the power to allocate personal support hours, but we can build strong partnerships. And I just think, I think that Arlene is actually using a lens that I really appreciate, and I'm hearing very positive feedback from others in terms of us coming to the table with our level of expertise, but also recognizing, what do the tenants want? It's not about which organization, it's actually, marrying that. But I think if you haven't, as board members, if you haven't had a chance to take a look at this report, please do, because I think it's substantive.
Great report.
Answers a lot of the questions that people have raised over the last 6 months or so. Who are we working with, and how are we doing it?
Thanks, Linda. Maureen?
Yeah, just very briefly. Arlene, you mentioned earlier that the SSC can be told by tenants that we want such and such a program or an activity, and now with the CSCs too. But speaking from the ground level, I don't think most tenants know they can go to their SSC to discuss activities or events. And I don't think most tenants know their CSCs. So just want to make sure that people are aware of that. As it stands now, tenants are of the belief that if they have an individual problem, such as a rent review concern or whatnot, then they go to their SSC. They're not aware that they can go to their SSC and say, why don't we have a such and such thing? So just throwing that out there.
Thanks, Maureen. I see Brad hand is up. Brad, do you want to respond? Thanks.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that both Arlene's, the Programs and Partnerships team, and the Operations team have teamed up, and the commitment is to hold one town hall in each of the buildings, each of the communities before the end of the year. And part of the slide deck that we've developed is to respond to Maureen's statement and goes into more depth, introducing tenants to the staff and a brief explanation of the role of each staff person that's there to support them, their community, and their tenancy.
Yeah.
It's something that we're working to undertake, and I believe we have 12 of them scheduled to happen in the month of August.
Wow, that's great.
We'll be moving forward to get the rest of the communities completed with Arlene's team before the end of the year.
That's great. That's great collaboration. Thanks.
Thank you.
Any other question before we invite Bill to depute? All right, seeing none. Before we get into the other item on this particular topic, which is the TSHC Senior Tenants Experience Survey, I'll invite Bill to address the board again. Bill, you've got 5 minutes.
Oop. I don't see him.
Very interesting conversation. Very good conversation that's been going on. And I want to add to that to answer a couple of questions regarding the tenant action funds. From the tenant's perspective and things that I hear from some tenants, they have difficulty through their SSCs accessing these things. It's something that the SSCs have been, have been instructed to learn, and we are seeing more of that effort. But it seems like the real issue is that there is nobody on the ground on a regular basis that is, that is around to be with or part of the community with tenants. The SSC works behind a closed door. They have office hours that when they're available for walk-ins, and that's all that is posted. The CSC, our CSC has 18 buildings. That amounts to 1 building per month. I really think that if you're not going to change the role of the SSC to be more front-facing with an open door, then you need to have as many CSCs as there are SSCs. For the simple reason that you have housing is actually absent in many ways. Housing is absent from this process. I am directly involved in all of this. I'm a Newark ambassador. I'm involved with Baycrest intimately. We, through our roundtable, are connecting with the community care coordinators from the province. Okay, so I mean, all of these different parts that Arlene is talking about pulling together, that's what we have been doing at Saranac on this building level. And some of the things that we've been doing through this roundtable, the rules of reference for our roundtable with the Red Cross, her vision for it is that she wants to use the roundtable model to be a more regional idea that brings in, that's going to be interest to other nonprofits, to bring them into it. So, I mean, there's all kinds of things that are taking place. It's just that tenants are left out of it. I know about it, because I stick my nose in things and I'm assertive. And I have my fingers, and I'm involved in all different aspects of this. But the tenants in this community know nothing. There is no, the only thing they know is in the monthly meetings when I bring somebody in to talk to them. Okay? And everybody, it's not their job. The SSC, their role is posted outside their office on what they will look at and what they do. And I have been told directly, they do not do engagement. Okay? What we're hearing is that, well, the SSC is the one that tenants are supposed to go to about their engagement. And then again, on the ground, I mean, what I'm hearing and what is being put together here is great. It really is. And I think it will work. It's just that it is so scattered and that the communication between agencies and whatnot is a bit conflicted. So things are not as smooth as they could be. It's going to take time. And I do believe that it will get there. But tenants, again, just sit and wait. And are not, there's no motivation and there's no support. We did a bingo yesterday with the Red Cross. And for gifts, I put out $45 of gift cards that I had received for work advising on things. And then on top of that, I spent another $20 at Shoppers to get some small little gifts for people. That came out of my pocket. Okay? And that is happening to tenants all around. There is nothing in place to support tenant initiatives. And that is something that is not being considered at all in any of this. So I've overstepped my voice. So thank you very much. Apologize for overspeaking.
No, thanks again, Bill.
Can I ask a question? Can I ask a question?
Yes. Go ahead, Brenda.
To Bill. Bill, do you think this would be helped if there was an allocation of funds per building so people knew that this was their kit, so to speak?
Thank you for the question, Brenda. Absolutely, I do. And if I'll cite an example. Very recent. Trying to motivate our community, I had been pushing people to have a yard sale. And we gathered some things together. It was the small usual group that does things. But we pulled these things together and we invited people and said, no charge for tables. Bring your stuff down. And, if you want to sell your own things, go ahead and just give the house 10%. Well, we had 2 days. We did one day, it was rainy. So we set it up in our recreation room. Tenants came in and bought things, as well as outside folks. So tenants were able to come in and purchase a microwave, for $25 instead of having to go someplace and pay $100. So there was a benefit there. Then it was sunny on Sunday. We did it outside. And more people showed up. And more tenants came and brought their own things. The end result was when we had our meeting, our community meeting yesterday, there was excitement. There were people that we want to do something. Somebody stood up and said, I have an idea on how we can bring different cultures together and once a month or every other week.
Absolutely.
And so we held up a bag of $542.60 that was collected from this yard sale.
That's great.
And we left the meeting at think about what we can do with these funds. So absolutely, I think having that support, that would be support for a community. It would be a way for communities to start coming together to make decisions about things. And honestly, when things start to happen, which I've heard from this board and the QTE, that when we start, we need to put things on the ground. You need to see things happening. Because of my health, I stepped back from the tenant rep role a month ago. And the question was, am I going to do the barbecue again this year? And I said, no, I can't. I can help, but I can't do it. And so these tenants, when I stepped down a couple of weeks ago and had Jay Preet here and our CSC here, as well as the Red Cross, they were promised their barbecue, and now they want to know where it is. And it was a question that was raised at the meeting yesterday. And of course, there's been no answer and no communication back and forth. So it's these things of not knowing where, but I'm wandering. But to get to the point, yes,
all right.
It would absolutely help. I think it would bring communities together. It would give communities goals. It would give would give them something to look forward to. And I think if you want to build community, that's how you start. There has to be a common purpose.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Again, appreciate your comments and some of those considerations. I'm sure Arlene and Brad will take as they implement the recommendations that are being brought before the board here today, and getting the actual work on the ground, finding ways of ensuring that there's some certainty regarding access to financial resources are some of the things that we will be considering. And as always, we appreciate your comments and your engagement, and would encourage you to continue to keep our feet to the fire and ensure that we continue to deliver services that engages our tenant and then reflects their considerations and their concerns. We'll move on to.
Can we make that a direction to staff to report back to us as to the feasibility of doing this on a building by building basis? I mean, I'm trying to think of how to move this simple.
Yeah, I thought that was part of the work that Arlene is going to come back with.
Oh, okay. Is it? I didn't get that, so correct me if I'm wrong.
Arlene, go ahead.
Through the chair. So Brenda, we will be able to report back on what we're doing through the buildings, and also the Tenant Action Fund is being revamped in a way that will actually align very closely to what Bill is talking about, where there is an allocation per building. We are looking to implement a building priority setting exercise on an annual basis with tenants supported by the community service coordinators. That's part of the framework that we're taking to STAC next week for review, so that they have an opportunity to provide comment and feedback before that the new model and new process, is brought forward to the board for approval. So we are taking exactly what Bill is saying around trying to strengthen communities and trying to strengthen it through providing funding and being clear about what funding is available per building. We are taking those steps, and we are also taking steps. We're introducing this month an update to all tenant leaders that tells them what's happening across the organization, not just in their buildings or their region, but across the organization. We're beginning to do that work to make sure that people are aware of what's happening. So just wanted to comment on that. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Arlene. So Grant, over to you.
Okay, so just to clarify, I think Bill was disputing on the tenant engagement model item. And so you may want to have Arlene present on that item at this stage, and then I can return to the interstrategic direction if that works.
Okay, all right. That's fine. I'm fine with that. Arlene, do you want to present now?
I can see this through the chair. I see Maureen's hands up, and Maureen is up.
Thank you, Arlene. A quick request, if it's possible. Would it be possible to put out 2 posters? One informing tenants what TAF funds are and that they're available. Speak to your SSC. I believe something like that was supposed to have been posted, but I don't believe that it has actually gone up in a lot of buildings. Tenants don't know what it is. The other thing is, could we put up a poster saying, if you have an idea for an event or an activity, please go speak to your SSC about it, because they don't know they can do that either.
Has it been clear who does the engagement piece? Is it SSC or CSC? Is that clear? I don't know the answer to
No,
it.
they both will be involved in some area.
Because I thought we were getting tenant engagement coordinators in each region. Is that, am I mistaken on that?
That's the CSCs.
Okay.
But as Bill alluded to, 18 buildings in his area.
Yeah.
I think in the southeast it's 25. So tenants actually don't do face-to-face with the CSC very often.
Okay. Yeah,
or even know that they're there.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the poster would be a simple way for the interim until things get straightened out.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Arlene.
Thank you. Through the chair, so I'll provide my tenant engagement model update. There is a comprehensive deck that accompanies my report. I will just provide my report summary in order to economize on time. We have been working with Barnes Management Group on to do the environmental scan, tenant focus groups, and tenants guidance sessions during the first phase of the project to get to just confirm some of the things that we've heard and get any new findings that tenants wanted to bring forward to inform the work that we're going to do towards building a new tenant engagement model that is seniors focused for TSHC. Additionally, we sought input from the Quality and Tenant Advisory Committee in our last meeting as a board proxy on the overall approach. We did get some concerns raised at that meeting by Councillor Crisanti and others, just wanting to make sure that we were not suffering from analysis paralysis and that we were going to actually get on with doing some work. And we just wanted to confirm for the board that we have over 45 agencies leading over 200 programs. We also have tenant-led programs in buildings, and so there's work that's being done while work is being done, if you know what I mean. So there's the work that's being done today, and then there's the work that we're doing to plan for the future for tenant engagement. And so we wanted to also, I just want to touch down also that part of the feedback we got in the QTE was that the CEO noted that we are not in a position, as was previously done, where there was an election process that was held to pick tenant leaders. We are going to talk with, as part of our co-design consultation, about how we need to go about picking or determining, the tenant leaders that will move forward in the new model that would be coming forward at the end of the year. The report overall outlines information about the environmental scan and some key findings. I will, in the interest of time, because I know we're probably a little stressed for time today, just note a couple of things. That one of the things that was brought up today, I think it was Maureen talking about language matters. So that's one of the things that we have to continue to strive towards getting better at, making sure we have language that both represents the voice of the tenants, but also works with the community, other communities that we have to work with. The comment that was raised earlier by Bill about we also have to make sure that community rooms are more available, so use of space is addressed adequately as part of the overall how tenants are able to create community within the tenant engagement model. We had done some research that involved speaking with the Red Cross, speaking with the Nork Ambassador Program, Baycrest, and Ottawa Housing. 3 of the 4 providers that we spoke with obviously work with us, and Ottawa Housing does not. We had some lessons learned from Ottawa Housing, and one of the most important lessons is to make sure that we don't do anything without tenants. And I think we've heard that very clearly here today. We have continuously heard from tenants that nothing for us without us. And while we continue to strive I think this will be a continuous work because it's like, if you look at the demographics of Toronto seniors housing, it is the size of a small town. I live in a small town. Our population is 16,500 people. The population of Toronto seniors housing is 15,000 people. We're trying to pull a small town together, and in all small towns, people don't always agree, and they don't always want the same thing, and they don't always want to go the same way. So there needs to be a little, for us, we have to find something that resonates for many, but likely we have to just understand that perhaps it may not always resonate for all. We spoke with 172 tenants as part of the focus group process. We addressed tenants in 7 languages, with 37 tenants speaking with us through interpreters. The tenants told us that they don't make a distinction, may not make a distinction between building issues and tenant engagement. So one of the important learnings that we have to build into whatever we do moving forward is that while tenant engagement might sit over here as a concept around how we manage to manage communications between the corporation and tenants and tenant leaders, if that's what we continue to have moving forward, and that's what the tables decide. There's also this other piece that's actually quite materially important. This is about, community and communications and supports, but there's this other piece that's just very basic, and this is the part that where Brad and I really, this is the intersection. A clean, safe, healthy home is part of creating this other piece, because this other piece isn't going to matter. The social piece won't matter as much if I don't feel clean and safe in my home. So this is where our work crosses over so much. And we're really, Brad and I are very much working together to try and address both parts of that equation to make sure that the work that he's doing and the work that we're doing on the tenant engagement side is really looking at this holistically, but understanding that the work is happening concurrently. So it's both going on at the same time. We've been in conversation with STAC, tenant leaders in the tenant working group throughout the process. And so the tenant leaders, there's 73. The working group has 14 members, and STAC has 12, with about 8 of them that are very active. And they have told us what they want to see moving forward, and we have been listening very closely to the work that to their input. The next phase of the project is co-design, which begins in late fall, so September 19th, 20th, and October 3rd, 4th. We will begin the co-design work, and the general principle here is to bring parties together to try to develop a model moving forward that represents the views of those that have to work within it. As of right now, we have 130 people invited to the session. 70% of the guests for the co-design session are tenants. So just to manage how valuable, the tenant voices. The tenants that are being invited are the tenant leaders, STAC, and the working group. The working group is from the Southwest region, and the Southwest region has been invited to be a working group because in the Southwest region there is no tenant engagement model to date. They work slightly differently. So I wanted to just touch down on that. We have also been fortunate enough to be able to get the voice of Maureen and Jim as our 2 board tenant directors to co-sponsor our work moving forward. And I've had such incredible guidance and support from them. I am always humbled in the conversations I have with them because their questions are not complicated. They're not unclear. They're just like, tenants want this. Can you do that? And so we've had really good conversations, and they've been offering some guidance to me. So I'm very appreciative, and they will also be joining our project team meetings in August and September to help continue to drive the effort. So I wanted to provide that update to the board on the tenant engagement model, but the details of what is happening throughout the process and what has gone on and all the findings are in the deck that's been provided.
Thanks, Arlene. Are there any questions? Go ahead, Brenda.
Is there any attempt to try and have a consistent model of representation? I mean, I know there's discussion about different regions, different buildings are different, and I'm a little frustrated with just leaving it at the local option discussion. I think as an organization, we need to communicate with people, and there needs to be a system to do that. And I think the more we standardize the representation piece, whether it's through elections or appointments, I don't have a particular preference, but I just think there should be some consistency across the whole city. So when we talk about working with tenant reps, we know that there's good representation across the whole city, and that our job is to ensure that there are representatives in each building, each area. So I don't know if that idea has been given up in favor of the local design option, but I really stress I would prefer to see a consistent method of representation. And then you can work with the tenants in terms of tenant development and professional training, so to speak, workshops to help them in how to be a good representative, how to conduct meetings, how to conduct consultation to get people's opinions. So you only get that if you have a fairly uniform method of representation. So I'd like to put that out as something I think we should work towards.
Through the chair, if I may address.
Yes, go ahead.
So Brenda, yes, that is one of the questions we're actually taking to our co-design session. Is what is it that tenants want as it relates to creating a way of interacting with them? What we learned from Ottawa was that they had they did have modifications to their models. Different ways of working with different groups of tenants because they wanted and or needed different methods. There wasn't a sort of a one way, a one model, a one shot that worked for everybody. So that's one of the questions that we're going to be talking about at the workshops is, how does this need to be designed? And is this, do we need to have a federated model where there is one person, or is there a different approach that tenants are looking for us to have?
Well, I think representation, like any election or any representation thing, is universal. So I don't buy the argument that there should be different approaches. No, because how can you engage with people if it's not some consistency? So I just want to say, from my perspective and my professional experience, you got to have a fairly standardized way of representation so you can get to the most people. If you have this ad hocery, then you're going to get gaps like the Southwest that doesn't have any representation. I mean, what is that about? And you can't only go with what the tenants want. I mean, that's important. But there's a need as an organization, as a corporation, that we set up a framework for how we engage with people and how we get them represented. And if we have a role in this too. It's not just what the tenants want. I want, as a board member and a board of directors of the corporation, to have some consistent way of communicating and having people represented. And I think you can only get that with a fairly standardized type process. So with all due respect, with this notion of sensitivity to local option, no, everyone has a right to be represented. Everyone has a right to an election or whatever process we use, just like you would in the community if you had elections and representation on your school board and on your election. I mean, what are we going to say? Thorncliffe Park has a different way they want to do politics, so we're not going to do, an election process? I mean, really?
Yeah, thanks, Brenda. That sort of consistency and that standardization, I think, is that principle itself, I think, makes a lot of sense. So, Arlene, I think as part of your deliberations, it would be important to take that into consideration because I think there is need. And I think Brenda is right in saying that, there is two sides of the coin here, right? As a corporation, we need to sort of think through what is in the best interests, what sort of promotes the public good, as it were, while at the same time doing our best to try and engage our tenants and ensure that what they're requesting are reflected in some of those deliberations as well. So I think those are useful feedback as you kind of contemplate going out there and having those conversations and coming back to the board with some recommendations.
And I think
any other
express that too. As our
Thank
preference.
you. Any other comments on this issue before we move on? Okay. All right. Grant, I'm conscious of the time. So we've got a couple of items here, which is the interim strategic directions, as well as the senior tenants experience survey. I presume you're going to begin with the interim directions.
Yes, thank you, through the chair, Fareed. And I do realize that I'm the next 4 items in a row. So I know we have an in-camera segment scheduled in about 30 minutes. So I will move as quickly as possible, and if I'll try to address these. So I'll start with the interim strategic directions. Just want to highlight we've included a report to follow up on the the work that's been done since we had the content around the interim strategic directions approved at the April 27th board meeting. What's included in the package are the visually enhanced design document versions of the interim strategic direction. So if you recall, when it was brought forward to board, it was a PowerPoint presentation. Now it's an actually visually designed document. As well, some of the language has been reviewed from a readability and an understanding perspective to ensure that the document is easily accessible to all folks when they read it and to understand it. We've included there are also AODA compliant versions as well now. These are the versions of the material. So the 3 attachments to the report being the document itself for the interim strategic directions, the metrics or key performance indicators document, and the roadmap or list of actions are all the versions that will be posted on the TSHC website as well going forward shortly after this meeting upcoming. And we're very pleased with regards to the fact that we're now moving forward with a communications plan more broadly on the materials, which will include, as I just noted, posting on the website, will include communication with staff, with our key partners and stakeholders, including STAC. And then going forward, we're going to be monitoring, reporting back to board on the status of the actual actions associated with the interim strategic direction. So coming on a quarterly basis back through committee and board to provide an update as to how we're doing as an organization. So the first update we're working on now will be the Q2 2023 update that we'll bring back at the next board meeting. I also want to just flag that, within the versions of the roadmap that is attached here, and I know there's a lot of material in the package, this does now include the actions from the QIP projects, the quality improvement projects, as they have been slotted into the interim strategic directions in this view. And then finally, I just want to return back and just note, and thank on behalf of all of us, I think, the work of Mary Tate, who's no longer working with Toronto Seniors Housing, but she was a big part of the effort up until and when she concluded her assignment with us at the end of June. The next steps on this will be focused on the communication and then the monitoring aspects. So I'll stop there and see if there are any questions.
Yeah, just thanks, Ron. Just to reiterate as well, I mean, as the board discussed at the last meeting, we're going to move and try and accelerate and implement these directions with Jill as well. So, nothing is being put on hold. And as Grant indicated, there's going to be continuous updates to the board, but things are moving ahead, and certainly these are initiatives that certainly folks are looking forward to, both the members of the board as well as the as our tenants. So thanks, Brad. Sorry, thanks, Brad. Any other question on the directions?
I like the format.
Okay, Maureen, go ahead. You're on mute, Maureen.
Sorry, just wanted to say it's really great to see all of the different departments and programs in areas all now being connected and run through the interim strategic direction. Yeah. It gives a continuity, and I'm starting to feel it. So it's really great. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, and I think that collaboration, collegiality, and horizontality is really, really fundamental, because everything is connected to everything else.
That's right.
So
That's
to
right.
have the entire Seniors Housing Corporation moving in one direction, that has always been a challenge in the public sector, but I think that is changing, and it is a welcome change. And I'm so pleased to see the team working across departmental lines to get things done, because from a tenant perspective, it doesn't matter. We're all part of TSHC, and regardless of which department or unit we represent. So that collaboration is recognized and is a step in the right direction. Brenda.
Who's in charge of coordinating all this? Is this the new business manager, strategic? I forget the title of that position.
That's part of it, but I think this is something also that the CEO has his hands or her hands on, because this straddles the entire organization.
Yeah.
And it goes beyond the strategic manager. and it requires all of the directors to be working in concert. And I know that Tom emphasize that collaboration in my discussions with Jill. I think that will continue. So I think the accountability for this resides with the CEO and pulling the different teams together and making sure that that is sustainable.
Because I did notice certain staff were identified, director of so and so for this, and just it's quite a big piece, and I just wondered if there was one point person on it.
So just through the chair, Fareed has already identified the CEO as the prime.
Yeah.
I am the director of strategy and business management.
Yeah.
Just for context, and so our team is helping to facilitate the processes that underpin these updates and working with the CEO's office and the rest of the teams as well.
Great, thank you.
So, and yes, you have duly noted that the accountabilities associated with each of the strategic objectives, for example, are noted in the roadmap. And this filters down into performance planning and other things that are associated. So yes, that is part of this process too.
Okay.
All right, thanks, Grant. Do you want to move on to the Seniors Tenant Experience Survey?
Sure, thank you. So through the chair, the report that's attached today is the same content that we discussed at the July 17th Quality and Tenant Engagement Committee to introduce more specifically what we're doing around conducting a seniors tenant experience survey. So the intent behind the senior tenant experience survey is to have a mechanism to engage tenants on getting a measure of satisfaction on a number of fronts. We will align the survey into what we just talked about, the key aspects and some of the components around the interim strategic directions. We did a jurisdictional scan as well in advance of preparing for what is now an active procurement. So we have an RFP on the street right now to acquire a vendor for this to support us in this work. So we looked at some other housing providers. Our intent is to do a survey across all of our tenants pending the procurement and the costs associated with that. And we will also potentially look at subsets of tenants. And it's a survey that we're looking to do both this year in 2023 and then every 2 years. So the next one would be in 2025. We're looking at ensuring that we have a robust and a strong communications plan to go along with this so that we can encourage tenants to participate in it. It'll likely be a largely paper-based survey, which is how it was done previously, with an online component we expect as well to give people flexibility in how they do it. It will be an anonymous survey for tenants. And we will ensure that we're also supporting it from a diversity perspective and the languages of our tenants and things like that as well. And the intent is to bring a vendor on board in the early fall, work through our process to develop the actual survey, engage some focus groups and some tenants in some of that to test some of the survey content. And I know we talked a bit about this at Quality and Tenant Engagement Committee. Potentially some board members may be interested in participating in some of those discussions. And then we would administer the survey in Q4 of this year, and the findings and final results would likely be in early 2024. So I'll open it up for any questions at this point. We're very excited about doing this. This is really important for us to get a gauge on how we're doing. This will be the first survey, obviously, since we've been a corporation of our tenants, and it will be a really important data point for us to understand how things are going and what we need to continue to focus on and or adjust.
Okay, thanks, Grant. Yeah, that focus group, I think, to test the survey and its applicability and relevance, I think would be an important feature. So I know we had a bit of a conversation at QTC, but that's going to be an important component. Any other questions?
So we're doing a staff survey as well as a tenant survey, right?
Yes, the staff survey has been done later in the year. Yes.
Yeah. And who's going to tabulate the results? If you have a paper, questionnaire survey, then that's a lot of physical work to tabulate it. I know obviously computer driven would be better, but.
So through the chair, Brenda, the intent is that the survey vendor would tabulate all the results.
Ah, I see. I understand. Thank you.
One quick. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Maureen.
Grant, thanks, Fareed. will the former survey be of any use, or are you asking the vendor to start from scratch?
We will, thank you through the chair, Maureen. We will look to the previous survey. So there was a survey done
Yeah.
previously
2020.
in 2020 when we were part of the of TCHC at the time. We did a survey as a baseline for the integrated service model work. And so, yes, we will refer back to that survey as well. That was a very well responded to survey. We had about 40% of the tenants respond to one. That was a paper-based blend with online, but the vast majority did it paper-based.
Sure.
I know we did have a focus group at the time to help support testing the survey, whether or not it was, understandable, too long, the right number of questions, things like that. So we'll do something similar. We will look to model on the success of that. However, now that we are, in TSHC and have more specific context around our strategic directions and other things we want to measure, we'll supplement that. So hopefully we'll have some comparatives to what some of the results we had back in 2020, but it'll be a bit of a refresh on the survey. The actual survey is not something we have specified in detail at this stage.
Thanks, Brett.
See Arlene put her hand up.
Go ahead, Arlene.
Just wanting to comment and manage expectations that when the last time the survey was administered with seniors, it was the 40% participation rate represented a specific region. So we're going to be now looking at the full population of 15,000.
Oh, right.
So if you see a delta in terms of, it probably it may or may not be 40%, but I just wanted to manage expectations around that.
So it's not going to be the Barnes Management Group then. That's going out for.
So
okay.
Just through the chair, we have an active procurement. So there's an RFP on the street right now.
Yeah.
That comes later this month, and so we do not have line of sight yet as to who will be doing this.
There's some good stuff in this.
Okay. Thanks, Ryan. So we'll move on to item number 12, which is the key performance indicators dashboard. And Grant and Christine, sorry.
So I'll move through this one very quickly through the chair. So as part of the work that we talked about doing as we developed the interim strategic directions, the key performance indicators was to bring forward a new dashboard for the board to look at from an overarching perspective. So a subset of the key indicators for the organization. And so that's what we've developed. And Christine is the lead on this work on our team, but has worked in partnership across the team. And we've had conversations on the KPIs and all that in advance as we've discussed previously around the interim strategic directions and how it all aligns. So the dashboard in front of you is intended to be a quarterly update that we would bring forward to board to show an integrated view of how we're doing on key metrics across each of the key areas of the interim strategic directions. So each of the four strategic objectives and the 2 strategic enablers. And the version of the dashboard that has been prepared and is attached to this report today shows the subset of metrics that have been determined to be included in this prototype version. We're interested in feedback on what's there. The data represents Q1 results for TSHC, so it is real data on that dashboard. And then our intent is to publish this dashboard publicly as well. In the long term, our goal is to actually evolve the way that the dashboard is presented into a more of an interactive web view as well, so that it can be looked at in addition to just sort of it's currently an Excel spreadsheet. That's the way it's been developed. So I know we're a little bit tight on time for today, but we're very, very excited that we're bringing this dashboard forward. In context, it will be a new way for the board and for all of our stakeholders to see how we're doing from an indicator perspective on the key elements associated with the ISD. This will not be the only aspect around key performance indicators, because as in the material that was attached and as part of the interim strategic directions package, there are many more key performance indicators that we'll include on this dashboard. So this is meant to be a summary view for the board across the main strategic areas. So I'll open it up for any questions, and we can always, obviously, if there's any feedback on this subsequent to this meeting, we're open to receiving that as well.
I like it.
Any?
Yeah, it's good. Just make it bigger so people like me can read it. The script's a little
That's
small.
a fair point, Brenda. So to that point, that's part of the intent to move it into more of a web design where you can sort of expand and contract and, you know, zoom in and things like that, where the current view is a prototype of the metrics.
Yes, I understand. Yeah, but it's good. It gives, it's
You
good.
can cross-check. It's great.
Yeah.
Well done.
Thanks again, Grant.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll move on to item number 13, which is the quality improvement projects report. This is an information item again.
So I will, given time, and I'll do a very quick summary of this. I don't want to shortchange the amount of work and effort and detail that went into this. Yeah. So I'll give you a high level perspective on what's in the package, and then take any questions. So just to recap, there were 3 quality improvement projects, one on pest management, one on safety and security, and a third one on staff and tenant relations. They were designed to be set up in a collaborative problem-solving environment and an approach with staff and tenants working together. We worked through a sequence set of staged discussions over a series of months and meetings on each of the topics to ultimately come through to understanding the problems in more specific detail and looking at opportunities for improvements. There were some overarching themes that were arrived at through the quality improvement projects across the 3 projects, including things like how important it is to understand data to inform this work, these types of projects, the importance of communications and information associated with this, and in particular to tenants, and how important that is. That building strong communities in general is a foundation to address a number of different issues. And we talked about how we can do that through different initiatives in this board meeting as well today. There were some common themes and in some ways some actions or recommendations that cross between the different quality improvement projects. And that was something that was very interesting to see, and we look to build on that. And then that quality improvement, it truly is a collaborative effort. In the 3 quality improvement projects, so I will just give you a summary. In pest management, there were 5 categories of recommendations in areas around analytics, prevention, treatment, tenant support and participation, and how to deal with in particularly high-risk buildings, and 24 recommendations embedded. And those are detailed in the attachments. So you can look at those in great detail if you want, with descriptions around each of those recommendations. For safety and security, there were 4 categories of recommendations, including around building and physical spaces, personal safety, community building, which was a quite interesting one, because it really talked about how different aspects around community development and community activities support safety. And then the specifics of recommendations for the community safety unit, or the CSU, which is a service we get at TSHC to support our buildings from TSHC. There were 42 recommendations embedded in the safety and security quality improvement project. And then in the final project on staff and tenant relations, there were 4 categories of recommendations. Those were being relationship building and focusing on that, overall interactions between tenants and staff, again, information and communication and the importance of that, and then tenant leadership. So there are a number of things that came out of the staff and tenant relations QIP that have been referred over to the tenant engagement model work, the tenant engagement piece that Arlene was just speaking to. So there were a number of recommendations or considerations that came out of the staff and tenant relations QIP that actually can inform and help support the tenant engagement model. There were 34 recommendations there. When we brought this forward to Quality and Tenant Engagement Committee a few weeks ago, one of the things that was discussed was, wow, there's a lot of recommendations here. How are we going to get all this done? So in a number of cases, we've been able to group some of these recommendations. And as I mentioned earlier, we've been able to align them into the interim strategic directions. Internally as a team, we've also looked at how those alignments work over time, because you can't do all of this at once, but also on a priority basis. And one of the point I want to just highlight, and it's been discussed in some other topics today as well, is that this is not work that's necessarily starting from scratch. A lot of the work and a lot of the items that were discussed across the quality improvement projects already had, pieces of work in progress and or planned. So it's to build on that and to ensure that we're reporting back. So the intent is to report back to board as well, similar to the interim strategic directions, because this is all aligned into the interim strategic directions. And to Maureen's point a moment ago, we'll be able to provide integrated updates across this work and the overarching interim strategic directions as a whole. There's also an intent to report back through Quality and Tenant Engagement Committee, and then in the future next year also to the teams that were participating in the quality improvement projects to regroup and give them an update on how things have gone. So the other thing I'll just mention is that we did also have a lessons learned component to this effort. So at the end or near the conclusion of all the work, we did do a few targeted sessions on lessons learned to understand how we can build and improve upon future quality improvement projects, to be successful in the future and learn from any potential opportunities to improve. So we did specific sessions on lessons learned with the tenants that have participated in the QIPs, as well as the staff, and also looked to get input from the facilitator. We had hired an external facilitator. Western Management Consulting was helping us with facilitation. They gave us a document on lessons learned as well. Those are also included in the package that was in the board materials today. These quality improvement projects are fundamental. When you look back at where these originally came from, these were the initial priorities that were identified, around transition time last year, and then also reinforced through the listening tour that Tom went on, and have been also reinforced through the strategic directions that we've now established as a corporation. So these are fundamental pieces of work that, we're at the conclusion of the work that was done to come up with the plans. Now it's executing on the plans and continuing to move forward, reporting on them, and ensuring that the results and improvements are actually taking effect. So I just want to express a thank you to everybody that participated in this work, including all the tenants, staff that supported this, and I'll take any questions.
Thanks, Grant. Are there any questions? Brenda, go ahead.
I just want to comment on the depth and breadth of these reports and to give a pat on the back to staff and people responsible for all this. It really brings home how so much of the work we do is the devil's in the detail. It's the day-to-day good management that will make people's lives safe and secure, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm quite impressed and overwhelmed at the same time with all this and the work that was involved in doing this. And I'm very appreciative of that and the attempt to track it and follow it. And so I just want to say that it's a huge amount of work that has been done. I don't even know how this all got done, to tell you the honest God's truth. And to congratulate staff and whoever's responsible for this. And with respect to the community safety audits, I support those. I've been involved with those in the past, and they can actually help produce a sense of community engagement and involvement because people feel a buy-in when they're talking about the safety of their building, and also part of my previous comments about the perception of safety versus the reality of safety. So just comments, general comments like that, and to thank everyone.
Thanks, Brenda. Councillor Crisanti. You're on mute, Councillor.
Where is he? Oh,
there we go. I'm sorry. I thought we could read lips. So just to pick up, I was saying where Brenda left off, and some good comments there. On the safety audit, indicating here that you're conducting regular safety audits to about 1/3 of the buildings per year. What would it take to increase the frequency of that and to do a safety audit in all the buildings every year? Given that I think that's a phenomenal way to ensure an increased safety, of our tenants.
So yes, through the chair, Councillor Crisanti. So the intent is to do safety audits in 1/3 of the buildings, or an audit basically once every 3 years. The safety audits are a piece of work that is actually done through the community safety unit, which is the service that's provided by Toronto Community Housing Buildings. And we have actually had conversations subsequent to the quality improvement project with the community safety unit to see if we can get additional resources allocated to do this work for our buildings.
Good.
And so they are considering that, and they have advised us that they are considering how they could look to help support more audits in our buildings. We're not actually at 1/3 of our buildings a year in terms of the number of audits that are done to date.
Right.
It's less than that. So we would like to see the frequency increased as well. And that's part of that conversation with them, is to see if we can get more audits done, because to the point that Brenda made, there's different benefits to those audits, that they look at a number of aspects of safety. It's not just the cameras and the door locks, it's also about other things.
Yeah, Grant, is there an opportunity then, maybe since we're sort of all agreeing and we're moving in that direction, and maybe you tell me what timing is comfortable for you, maybe to get an update and a further discussion on this in the next meeting, to see if where we stand in terms of having an improved schedule to follow, a frequency.
We can Councillor, through the chair, we can take that back and work with the community safety unit to see if we're in a position to report back at the next board meeting.
Yes.
So we can take that as an action if we'd like on today's meeting.
That would be great. That's the action is fine. One final question here on this side, and on the safety unit, increased proactive patrols. Can you speak to that a little bit? It says increase proactive patrols. Well, proactive patrolling is the most effective way of keeping any community safe in a very proactive way. And when we're saying increasing proactive patrols, what do you mean by that, and what can we do to ensure that we're being as proactive as frequently as possible?
Yeah, so through the chair, so one of the learnings that was discussed, the community safety unit participated very actively. So we had membership from their team as part of the joint staff and tenant team doing the quality improvement project for safety and security. So they were able to give that table a bit more of an in-depth understanding of what the patrols are all about and how they assign patrols based on incidents and other things. So they have sort of a blend of proactive and reactive activities. So if something happens, somebody calls, that's more reactive. Proactive is they're out in the community, they're talking to tenants, maybe doing education, and they're just patrolling the sites.
Right.
One of the things we've done, as an example, in that dashboard that I just went through, but I didn't really have much time to get through it, I know, is we've actually split out in the community safety zone on that dashboard the proactive versus reactive activities. So we can start to see and measure more specifically how much proactive, how much reactive types of activities are happening. And the patrols are the proactive aspects. I think what we can do, and one of the other things that we'll continue to work with the CSU. They usually align the patrols into looking at different activities and incidents that are happening. So if there are particular things happening in a building, they may increase the patrols for a period of time in that community, and then measure to see if there's a change in what's going on with the incidents. But then there's overarching the general patrols as well. So we want to work with them to understand the data more in depth as to how many patrols are actually doing where and when. And that's part of the data improvement aspect of the quality improvement as well. Because they actually do already target proactive patrols to help deal with incidents and things that are going on in the communities that they're made aware of. So it's about getting more data around that to ensure that, because one of the things we did see through the data we analyzed is if you had more proactive patrols happening, you did see a corresponding change in incidents. That it was hard to directly correlate them, but it seemed like there was something there, which I think notionally we can understand. So we want to work on that.
It's good to have proactive, but we also know, and we know it works, but we also know it costs money. We need more boots on the ground. But I'm happy to see that we're agreeing to drive it forward in that direction more. And if we need to invest more in it, I'd be happy to, just discuss that possibility as well. All right, thank you. I think Brenda wanted, or I heard someone wanted to add.
Thanks, Councillor. No, we've got Maureen and Linda. So
okay,
Linda, go ahead.
Yeah, just my comment is more of a process. I think that the board should recognize the process of in-depth quality improvement that has been undertaken, which you don't often see in a housing organization. And I would really actually encourage us to keep building on this. And I actually think I remember way back thinking about being a best practice. This is like a best practice. What will keep us going in the direction is making sure that we sustain the efforts that are identified in these 3 clips, but then maybe actually adding on new quality improvement programs. But I do want to actually just recognize the approach that has been taken that seems to actually have garnered some improvement and in short order. And this is probably, if I was in an academic environment, I would say this is worth writing up, but I still think that actually we may want to actually share this with others, just as a way to also acknowledge the benefit of the seniors approach, the seniors lend, and this rigorous approach. So thank you very much for all of this.
Thanks, Linda. Maureen?
Yes, thanks, Breed. I just wanted to say, overall, it was wonderful. It really was, as Brenda said, an enormous amount of work, and don't know how you all did it, but thank you. It was raised in a couple of areas in the report, and I just want to highlight it, I suppose, that the QIP on the staff-tenant relations had to be managed differently. The measurements were not the same type of measurements. And I don't know if lessons learned really reflected some of the improvements that could be done on that particular QIP. So I would look forward to further discussions on that one in the future. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Maureen. Yeah, I mean, a tremendous amount of work has gone into this, and our challenge would be to be able to sustain and continue to measure and do what we need to do to make sure that we keep some of these projects top of mind, and we continue to engage and try and do our best to maintain the quality of delivery that we're so keen on providing. So, Brad and Grant, thanks to you and your team. I know there's a whole bunch of people behind the scenes that's working on this as well, and I want to recognize and acknowledge the support that you're receiving from the team as well. And again, this is work that cuts across the organization. And as a strategic lead, I think it's great that you're pulling people together to make sure that we're looking at this enterprise-wide rather than by department. So another great piece of work. Thank you very much. If there are no other questions on this, we will move into camera. So can I get a motion that the board close part of the meeting to the public to give consideration to a report containing personal matters about an identifiable individual? Councillor Crisanti, move. Can I may have a seconder, please?
I'll second it.
Thanks, Jim. All in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. I'll wait for a second to allow the recording and live feed to end.
What's the first item up? I'm just going through my slides.
It's on the Audit and Finance and Risk Committee report.